Honest, it's I got to be honest, is my first time as a journalist and an anchor. So please help me doing this task for today. But it's a great honor, as Pierluigi said before, and let me say, I'm pleasure to have the opportunity to introduce you to the Italian community of surgeons. For people who may know you, Andrew Kirkpatrick is one of the most eminent surgical personalities in the field of acute care surgery, and not only medical care and trauma. And Andrew is a professor of surgery at the Department of Surgery and Critical Care Medicine at Foothills Medical Center of the University of Calgary, Canada, Alberta. And is here today with us to talk about his recent publication entitled "Are Surgeons Going to Be Left Holding the Bag?" That is going around incisional hernia repair and intra-peritoneal non-absorbable mesh positioning, and especially regarding the complication of this type of intervention. The publication the paper has been published recently in Journal of Clinical Medicine. So, Andrew, let me thank you to be here with us today. I went through the manuscript several times during the last few days, and every time I did it, I found some new perspective into it to talk about. If you agree, I will pose some questions to you, starting from some quotes from your paper, which I personally found of a particular interest for me and also for the audience, and which probably will leave room for further discussion in the next days. First, I would like to know from your voice whether the idea of this paper came to you from a real life experience. And if yes, if you could tell us something more about it.
You know what? I would absolutely love to. And Mauro, thank you. I thank you for this opportunity. I also thank you for being a co-author. And I would very much start with a disclaimer that, you know, I have been doing hernia surgery for over 30 years now and trying to learn more about it. There is so much I don't know. And writing this paper, I tried to answer some questions and go to the literature. And I will admit I was disappointed, as I think most guideline committees always start with a disclaimer. Here's our guidelines, but it's based on terrible evidence. And Mauro, yourself, and colleagues all around the world tried to help us put the data get together as best as we could. But as I'm sure will come out in our conversation, there are many gaps, and I have many more questions and answers. But how this all came about was sort of an epiphany, as you know, somebody becoming not senior in position, but senior in life. I kind of feel taken advantage of a little bit. And I will give, with your permission or with my apologies, a call out to anybody that would like to participate in the closed or open after laparotomy for severe complicated peritonitis, or the COOL trial, where we're trying to answer a critical question regarding using the open abdomen for sepsis. But so please, anybody, again, Italy is probably the most supportive country for COOL, and I would love everybody to help us with COOL. And that's a whole other topic that I won't mention again unless there's specific questions. But when we originally started COOL, we had support from the company that made the Abthera dressing, and then subsequently there have been a couple of corporate buyouts, and then the 3M Corporation took over the company that makes the Abthera and promptly canceled the research contract. and just said, oh, you know, you didn't look at page 27, clause 13B, where it says, you know, even though we support science, we don't have to if we don't feel like it. And I go, what? And how can this happen? And talking with my colleagues, they said, well, why would they? Why would a company want to do research that might prove their product is really helpful or might not? I go, well, don't they have to? And I started to read a little bit. And then I realized that medical devices are fundamentally different from pharmaceuticals. And I think there's some questions later and I can talk more about it, but I recognize that our governance from our governments, and again, I will not speak, I did not read a lot about Europe, but I believe there's, it is very similar, but in the United States and Canada, you don't need evidence to market a medical device. It's considered different from a pharmaceutical. You just have to prove it's substantially equivalent to something that has been available since 1976 and typically was never proven back then. So anything that's on the market, if you can prove your new thing is equivalent, not better, not even safe, you could market it. And so that was an epiphany to me, because all my life I'd assumed, you know, when you're learning, right, there's so much to learn as you're a surgical resident. They say, here, you know, put this in, and you do it because you assume it could never get into your operating room unless it was safe and effective. At least that's what I assumed, and I think most people assume that. And I recognize that is completely not true. And then my main passion, you know, I have many passions, but I'm a trauma surgeon. You know, when I work mostly on weekends and evenings. So what I would do in the daytime, well, you know, hernias, gallbladders, and appendixes. And you know, I started off with you know, my time in my career, we did overuse the open abdomen. So we created massive hernias. So we became the people that started to fix massive hernias. And over the course of 30 years, as I've become more interested, I tend to get a lot of the catastrophic hernias with loss of domain and more enterocutaneous fistulas. And I try to figure out, you know, all the guidelines are go back, see the original operative record and figure out what it is. We can never find that. These meshes were put in 10, 15, 20 years ago. There's no OR records, but and talking with my colleagues around the world by email, when we started to write this paper, everybody is saying, yes, this issue of catastrophic mesh complication is much more common than we were ever taught. But there's no data on it. So I think that's where it became a challenge to, let's try to learn as much as we can as a starting point for going forward.
So Andrew, you focused on the first issue I would like to remark, and that's the I know you know, and you better explain us that we don't have enough data about what happens when we put a mesh inside the abdomen, and you say that that's because we need longer follow-up times, and probably we need permanent registries to assess this type of complication, which can occur even 5 to 10 years later. We put a mesh inside the abdomen. So what do you think about it? Do you think that permanent registry of intra-peritoneal mesh placement is the proper way to address this issue? It's like something similar to what you did with previous registries on biological meshes and so on. You think it's a proper way also to consider this issue?
I'm going to say yes, absolutely, and probably put my answer as 2 major points. And I'm going to come back to the registry issue. And I do suggest that going forward, point 1, though, is even before we come to a post-operative registry, I believe to to use something that comes in and says, here, try this new thing, and we'll know 20 years from now whether it worked or not. Like that just doesn't make sense to me. That I do think devices need to be treated like pharmaceuticals, that there should be good data, that there's an onus on a manufacturer to prove that the device is not only effective, but it's safe, and it actually is cost effective. Because if it's just the same as something else, which is how it gets marketed or how it gets approved, then why do you need it, right? We don't, like, there's a confusing array of choices right now. Why do we need another choice that has no evidence? So I think step one is that I personally think, as I'm seeing these catastrophic cases that I believe are linked, there's many unknowns that got into people's operating rooms 15, 20 years ago with no, with just marketing, that shouldn't be okay. So we shouldn't even start off with this new thing that has an unknown risk that we're only going to figure out in post-market surveillance. But then, if that's happening, and for everything that we're using right now, all the devices and all, meshes and almost everything, like implants of any nature. And I'm not an orthopedic surgeon, I'm not a vascular surgeon, but there's all this stuff we put into people. Absolutely. I would suggest that every operation now should be in a national database that can be analyzed to see trends that come from hundreds of thousands of operations. We now have a provincial data registry. I can look at patients' medical charts almost anywhere in our province. It's a big geographical province. It's not a very populous province. So the technologies and the informatics to do these, major ongoing databases to answer specific questions, but also questions that come up in the future, are absolutely possible. I don't know from the, again, the money part of view, or paying for it, or the funding, but yes. And I guess, and then a third point, I will call out Italy, as in general, going back to my cool experience, Italy seems to have some of the most proactive surgeons willing to do research and help to answer questions as a culture. I think, and certainly in Canada, we don't have a culture of research. Our health boards want to look after people. They want to provide surgery, medical care. The health boards have no interest or mandate to do research. And it's always struck me as ironic that it's so hard to do a trial to find out if something is helpful or not helpful. But if I just have an idea and I say, oh, I have an idea, I'm going to put this horrible thing covered in asbestos in, somewhere, I can say, well, that was my surgical choice, and I'm allowed to do that. But it's so hard to do research. And
I think this focusing on our issue of today is it's even more important, because actually we don't have, as surgeons, I say, we cannot do anything in the pre-market phase of devices that are being released in the market. So I think we should do something in the post-market phase. And in my opinion, this is my personal opinion, registries are the only way we can use to assess a wide range of benefits, but also of drawbacks of new implants and new technology. And I think that in particular, surgeon must play an active role in requesting monitoring data, and also navigating the collection of this data, but also conducting themselves the monitoring process. That's whenever possible, I presume. And And the last phase of this process is the production of scientific evidence.